Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into tonight's second half, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's second half, shall we? Alright, folks, I have got some very horrifying encounters and some very interesting video clips. We'll start this upload off with a very interesting video clip. I shared this maybe 2-3 weeks ago, and I got my hands on a better copy of it and did a little bit more enhancement on it, and I wanted to share it with you guys again because this is a little more clear. And then we'll jump into some encounters and then some video clips at the end.
Hey, Shelly, you wanted to video the lake and see what it was like up here? Hold on, turn around. Lighting's bad. What the hell is that? What the hell did I just see? What the fucking hell? What the hell is that? What the hell?
Today's first encounter. I'm 53 years old and had an encounter with a Dogman 4 years ago in the fall. Without a doubt, the worst experience of my life. And honest to God, I'm still affected by it to this day. Understandably, anyone that I've told so far has doubted my experience, but I've always known what I had seen. I live in a fairly rural area. My old Jeep had broken down, so I was forced to walk up the road back to my house, which was bordered by woodland. I was only around a mile away or so. I decided to return in the morning for my car. I'm usually very comfortable at night, as I've no reason to be afraid. But as I was getting closer to home, I felt more and more uneasy and tense. I found myself looking over my shoulder more than once, till I started feeling fear and dread. Then I saw it through the trees. Not its body, just two amber-colored eyes. I could see through the woodland staring at me. That was enough to trigger my fight or flight, and I found myself running toward my home as fast as I could. I could barely hear it, but I knew it was in pursuit. I reached my house and saw the hellish thing right before I slammed my door shut. It was extremely tall, but hunched and walked on its hind legs. It radiated pure menace. I slammed my door, locking it, and retreating further into my home. I could hear this thing tapping on the walls, but for some reason it did not try to break in, even though I'm sure it could have. Eventually it must have left, but I can't describe how much fear I felt when it happened. Present day, I now own 3 guns, and all of the doors and windows are reinforced. I never go out at night, and so far it has not bothered me since. But I just wanted to share my experience. God bless you all. Today's second experience. First, I had never heard of a Dogman until I started searching for werewolf-like creatures. When I finally found out the correct name, I Googled it, and I found a sighting from Niagara Falls region that happened in the 60s, which is only about 30 minutes from me. The details were very similar to our experience. Felt like I had copied and pasted their experience, but I assure you this is a 100% truthful, personal experience, and I wouldn't have believed my eyes if I had been alone. It was July 19th, 2016. I remember the date because we had our annual Christmas in July at my in-laws, and it was a crazy full moon. We had left to head home. The time was approximately 11:30 p.m. We took the back way. We live in a somewhat rural area, so the back way is very dark, no traffic at the time of night, and the speed limit is 60 kilometers per hour. As we're driving along, about 5 minutes from home, out of the corner of my eye toward the forest on the passenger side, I catch a glimpse of something moving fast. The moment my foot hits the brake, my wife grabs my leg. Gosh, I'm getting goosebumps just typing this. We come to a screeching halt in the road, and whatever it was stopped dead in front of us. It cocked its head to look at us. We both at the same time said, "Do you see that?" It was huge, best guess, 7 feet. It had yellowish eyes that glowed from the headlight, and it was muscular and skinny at the same time, if that makes any sense. The most memorable feature, though, was its hind legs. 100% looked like a dog walking upright with that cocked angle in its legs. No sooner did it stop and glare at us did it continue to bolt across the road and vanish into the forest on my driver's side. The only way we have ever been able to describe it was werewolf-like, and like I said, my wife and I both agree. If we had not both witnessed it, I'd have called myself crazy and never mentioned it, but we both saw it. Today's third encounter is a subscriber encounter that I had narrated a while back and just found in a pile of papers that I thought I had gone through, so now I've got to put this in the California pile. Back in the early 60s, when I was about 10 years old, my dad and uncle pooled their resources and bought a brand new vacation home in Palm Springs, California. Our house was the second from the corner, right across the street from a newly built golf course that had super tall trees lining the course, seemingly more than a mile long and not too far from the city of Bermuda Dunes. Our vacation home had 3 bedrooms, a living room, dining room, TV area, and a small kitchen with a pass-through bar on one long side facing the TV area. The home also had a large rectangular pool in an oversized backyard. The kitchen had a door to the pool and backyard at one end, and the entrance from the dining room area at the other. To the left and right of that kitchen entrance from the dining area, and perpendicular to that, were 2 6-foot wide floor-to-ceiling walls that were painted bright white to the immediate left and right of that dining area entrance. There were no decorations on either of those blank walls. This description is very important, and you will see why. To help with sleeping accommodations, when we had extra guests, we had 2 couches that folded out into double beds. One couch was in the TV area facing the kitchen pass-through, and the other was directly across from the kitchen entrance, facing those two white walls, just to one side of the dining room and perpendicular to the other couch. Whenever we had friends vacationing with us, their kids and I were most often assigned to sleep on the fold-out couch directly across from the kitchen entrance. Directly above this couch was a long, narrow window that was positioned about 7 feet high, nestled right under the roofline. This non-opening window was about 5 feet wide and was only about a foot tall, making the top of this window about 8 feet height. At night, the two walls looked very much like a theater screen whenever any headlights or the moonlight came through that highly placed window. This window faced the same direction as the double front door entrance north. We were one of the only few homes on the far east end of this particular block, which was quite isolated from any of the other homes in this new tract. It was originally planned for more than 100 homes. At this point in time, there were no more than a dozen homes in the entire tract. The golf course was just one block east of us and was often vacant during the very hot summer months that we were always vacationing in. This course had huge, flat, tree-lined fairways. Since there was so much space all around us kids, we had an absolute blast hunting lizards, field mice during the hot summer days, along with any errant soda cans with our lever-cocked Daisy BB guns. We weren't very good shots, so we rarely connected with much more than pucker bushes and old rusting cans, which were made of steel back then. Sometimes we vacationed only with family. Other times, just one family or the other would plan a getaway with various other groups of friends. This vacation was one of the latter. Regardless, we always had a fantastic time as kids vacationing back then. All these homes were designed with 1-inch granite rock poured about 3 to 4 inches deep around the entire front yard as a replacement for grass. At the time, we had no other plants, just loose rock in the front yard, and 5-foot cinder block walls all around the sides and backyard. The loose rock made walking across it from the street parking difficult and very noisy at best. The front entrance had a 6.5-foot high U-shaped cinder block wall that functioned as a windbreak for similar height double entry solid wood doors with no windows. I remember the double doors had 2 large brass surrounds in front of the doorknobs and a magnified peephole for visitor identification on the operating door. On this particular vacation weekend, my mom brought my 6-year-old brother and my 10-year-old self along with my mom's friend Jeannie and her 2 boys, Chris, 9, and Greg, 11. During this vacation, I remember very clearly that each night we had a full moon and crystal clear weather, with very little wind. There was most always some wind. One night, after a particular hard day at play, Chris, Greg, and I slept on that under-window couch with me right in the middle. My brother was much younger, so he slept in the master bedroom with my mom and her friend. At around 2 or 3 in the morning, I was abruptly awakened by the sound of slow, plodding, heavy, rock-crushing footsteps in the front yard. They started from way out at the curb and became progressively louder as they got closer to our concrete walkway front entrance. The crunching stopped when it reached the section leading to the front door. Within a short period of time after the crunching stopped, the doorknob was twisted very slowly one way, and then the other multiple times, and always slowly, never fast, apparently trying to remain as silent as possible. Luckily, my mom had made sure the front door was locked and bolted before we all hit the sack. We were very isolated out in that lonely part of desert back then, and I was literally on the verge of pissing my jammies thinking of what might happen if it got in. After the knob twisting stopped, there was another short pause until I heard the same heavy rock-crushing footsteps getting closer and closer to a point directly outside of the house, where the couch we three were sleeping in and was directly opposite those two white walls. As it got near that high window, the full moon began casting its clearly focused shadow directly onto those walls right in front of me. With every rock-crushing step, it moved left to right directly in front of that window, bobbing and twisting its head, obviously trying to get a look around inside. After a surprising amount of time, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, whatever it was, eventually gave up and left, but not without a lot of continuous rock-crunching steps until it was completely out of audible range. Needless to say, as it was trying to see in, I curled my knees tightly up into my chest, so nothing of me was visible in all of that bright moonlight, which was lighting up the entire end of our fold-out couch, along with my clearly lit legs. Chris and Greg were far enough on either side of that couch, almost falling off, which prevented either one of them from being seen in that bright moonlight shining through the window. Needless to say, I was 10 years old and thoroughly creeped out. The next morning, after we three were all wide awake, I explained to Chris and Greg exactly what happened that evening, pointing directly to the white walls in front of us. They were both totally creeped out, but very interested and extremely eager to investigate. We went out to look before anyone was up. We didn't want anyone or anything to change the evidence that may still be out there. The rocks prevented any real accurate impressions, but you could clearly see there were large, very deep, square-shaped footsteps in the rocks as it entered and exited our front yard, as well as a large area of trampled rocks directly under that high window where it spent most of its time trying to view into our home. There was a fairly straight path of huge, deep rock prints coming from the street closest to the golf course, coming toward the front entrance, and then a diagonal path from the high window toward our driveway as it left. By the end of the day, our footsteps and everyone else's had messed up most of the evidence. The image that was cast on the wall was obviously very tall. The sound it made as it walked was extremely heavy, and at a slow but very steady pace, as if it was afraid of absolutely nothing, but was trying to be as silent and undiscovered as possible. What was most interesting is the image in silhouette had a partially rounded top of its wide head, with absolutely no neck as it turned slightly, while slowly bobbing up and down to get a view. The sharply pointed ears were absolutely straight up, which became a little closer together whenever it turned to either side, along with the length of what must have been a muzzle becoming larger in the profile. At the time, my 10-year-old self thought it was a spaceman's helmet with some strange pointed antennas, or possibly Batman. But today I know better, much better. It was a Dogman. Before I ever knew what one was, let alone draw a near-perfect representation of one exactly as I saw it, portrayed as, directly across from us on those white walls. The memory of what I saw in changing profiles was burnt quite clearly into my mind ever since. Today's fourth encounter. Back in 1991, my now wife and I were out on a driving date, and I was trying to take her to a place where I could possibly get some snuggles by scaring her. It was a clear fall evening, early winter, no leaves on the trees, cold, but not snowing yet. There's a place in Wadsworth, Illinois, just north of Waukegan, a suburb of Chicago called St. Patrick's Cemetery. This is an old wrought iron graveyard way out on a dirt road out in the middle of nowhere, away from most civilization. This graveyard has a long history of unofficial satanic activity, and also has a legend about a ghost car being driven by someone you can't see, and an old, pale-skinned lady in the back seat. This place is a very popular location for kids trying to be brave and prove themselves and show just how tough they are. I was once there with a group of friends at about 11 at night. We entered the gate and walked into the shadows. We heard something growling, but not like anything we had ever heard before. We then heard twigs breaking behind us, and we all hauled it out of there. But one friend went to jump the 7-foot wrought iron fence. He threw the baseball bat he was carrying over the fence and beat it to the ground on the other side. Anyway, my now wife and I were driving to the location from the back side, where she didn't recognize where we were, as she was terrified of this place. I began to slow my 1990 Beretta GTZ down, and she was sitting sideways facing me, where the graveyard was to her back. She suddenly realized where we were, and began begging me to go and get out of here. But me, being the scheming teenager that I was, started to pretend the car was having issues. She was almost scared to tears, so I decided it was a bad idea and slowly started to pull away. She looked out my driver's side door window, turned white, and started screaming. I was kind of chuckling at her until I turned to look and saw something. This thing was easily as large as a bear height-wise. There are no bears for hundreds of miles of this location. Jet black. Had a face and snout of a dog almost, but with the biggest teeth I had ever seen. Its eyes were yellow, and it was actually drooling on the window. I, of course, screamed like a teenage girl when it did that. This thing let out a huge roar, unlike anything I had ever heard before. It was 100% not a dog, not a bear, or anything else. I slammed my car down to second gear and punched it, and this thing ran right next to my window, slobbering and screaming, and gave up and trotted away when I hit 60. We were both scared beyond words, and naturally our date was over at that point. We went back the next day during daylight hours to see if we could see anything, tracks or any kind of evidence to explain exactly what this thing was. There were some scratch marks next to my tire tracks in the gravel, but nothing to suggest exactly what it was. As we approached the graveyard, there was an overpowering stench. It was so strong you could taste it, and the closer we got, the worse it got. We looked into the graveyard, and there was a grave dug up, a coffin on the ground open. I have only told one other person this, a good friend of mine, who has done a ton of research on Resurrection Mary, an almost world-famous ghost story in Chicago. He told me it sounded like a creature called a hellhound. He spoke to a friend of his from England named Mike Hallowell, a prominent ghost hunter and researcher who used this story in his paranormal newspaper published back in England. He also agreed it sounded like a hellhound, and that we should never go back there again. We have since moved away, but go back to visit family and friends, and maybe, being a little older, we may go back there on our return trip, and just see what happens. We have never talked about this with anyone else after my friend for fear of being called loony. On my children, Every word of this is true. Tonight's final, terrifying experience. A woman in southeast Ohio claims that a tribe of Bigfoot would harass her and the woman's family. Beginning in 1962, at one point when she was 12 years old, she was held captive in the cave by these creatures. The woman, who is now 60, wishes to remain anonymous and not reveal the Appalachia location where this occurred. She states, "I prefer not to say where this took place specifically. No one wants an invasion of Bigfoot hunters on private land. Let people go to the public lands like the Wayne National Forest to look for Sasquatch. People down in the hills love where they live because it's quiet. There's fresh air, clean water, great conditions for raising gardens and children, and being in thick of nature to see the wild animals up close is something they all value very much. I'd rather that people work harder on gathering the mountain of eyewitness reports and experiences that's been hidden in the past decades in this state than to see them destroying nature." According to her, she wasn't the only one experiencing encounters. She continues, "The creatures were witnessed in part by my parents. People do need to know that these things happened. It still pains me greatly, but at least I can talk about it now, in some part though, without anyone knowing who I really am. People are very cruel." The woman also said that the incidents happened too often to keep record, and that some of the neighbors had similar experiences, including some young boys fishing in a nearby river. These events were supposedly reported to the local PD. She also states that at one point a huge Sasquatch came back to take her, and her father shot it with a 12-gauge shotgun. The big one that had always come to take me out of my bedroom at night came this time during the day. Dad was about 15 feet from it. The shot was hitting this thing, and every time it hit, it'd stomp real hard on the ground with one foot after another. My brothers and I ran up to the bedroom because the youngest said it was higher ground for better defense, and there were moreover in a farmer's drainage ditch across the road. They were huge too. I mean, what do you do as a kid and you see something like that? Good thing my three brothers were there with me to protect me. I yelled to them to leave or they would be hurt. They finally left, but there were a lot of days where we did not leave our 3 acres. My brothers wanted to go check on the neighbors to see if they were okay or needed any help. She later claims that the Sasquatch were different sizes, male and female, but the biggest one was 14 feet, with a head that was at least the size of a basketball. His hair was long and about the same texture as mine, as she recalls. The hair on all of them was about the same shade of brown, like the color of decomposed wood layer in the forest. I could see skin around their eyes that was tan, and where there was facial hair, it was more sparse, with glimpses of skin showing through that area as well. I couldn't make out a neck. Chin was broad. His teeth were about the size of a nail on my middle finger, but they were more flat, and he had a mouthful of them, meaning the width of his bite was wide. His mouth was wide enough to show most of them. His eyes were dark with some white around them, less so than a human. There were crow's feet at the outer edge of them. His skin was weathered like anyone who had spent much time outside, almost like a farmer's. His shoulders were very broad, though I did see his collarbone on one side, which looked thick compared to a human's. He was muscular and heavily built, but in no way fat. There was an adult female and others who were almost as big as him, but they didn't seem to be young or old. I don't know if they were all related, but they seemed to be a close-knit group. So there was an adult male and female who seemed to be a couple, and the two others that seemed to have maturity and body mass, suggesting that they were what we'd consider 40-something humans. Other than that, I couldn't tell what their ages were. The woman then describes being taken captive. Many of my memories of these creatures were so traumatic that my mind hid them from me. I have no idea what else I've experienced with them in my childhood yet. You see, the memories are still popping up to the surface, and I've got to tell you, it's not a pleasant thing to know you had been taken innumerable times by these creatures across many hills far from your home. I have no idea what transpired while I was with them, but each time they took me, I was out all night long. She suffered in other ways as well. I was being used in a tug-of-war, and either side was winning. Certain people at nearby churches were told what was going on, so they'd take me aside, anoint me with oils, and lay hands on me, praying aloud. All I wanted to do was lie down and go to sleep from the circus. I was confined to the house for weeks, not being allowed to look out any windows. I was probably around 12 when I awoke in an underground cave that was dripping water from roots I could see stretching below the ground. You cannot imagine the horror. I was screaming my lungs out, and after a while, I ran out of force to make any sounds. But the air kept coming out of me. I could see these creatures surrounding me as I lie there unable to move on this giant slab of rock. I wanted so badly to scream some more, but I was just too tired to do that anymore. When I relaxed, they all started smiling and laughing. I thought, okay, they could have killed me and eaten me by now, but they haven't. Some of them are kind, but then again, I've seen cats play with mice for hours before they kill and eat them. These are clearly not childhood nightmares, as evidenced by the incident that took place around the time I was 12 or 13. Mom asked me questions each time he, the big Sasquatch, came back to my window and took me with him. He took me with him many times after talking to me to get me to tell the big guy not to take me with him, and that they told me to tell him no, I was not going. And that not seeming to work, she pretty much gave up asking me anything. She did talk to my dad about how to stop this from happening, that she thought it was affecting my health and robbing us of our sleep. There was the concern that if they did the wrong thing, this creature could kill everyone in the house. Mom often wept to my older sisters about this big hairy beast that got into the chicken coop and how she needed their help to convince Dad to do something to stop this before someone else got hurt. She told them not to go near me and told me not to go near them. She was quite fearful, and I really can't blame her. My family finally moved my bedroom downstairs, and this appeared to anger the large Sasquatch. I remember hearing him peck at my window upstairs, but I was strictly forbidden from leaving the area for any reason. He'd bang on the side of the house, and my dad would yell at him, "Go away," that he wasn't going to see me anymore, and that was that. He made these loud grunts and stomps on the ground to show his displeasure. I'd hear his thoughts in my head as if he was asking me where I was. One day, when I was 19, we were on my parents' front stoop talking. Before I left, there was this very long, very loud, deep scream, like a man was getting murdered up the road in the woods. Sound did carry, especially on a cold night. But this had excessive volume to it, and no human could have ever held that full scream for that long. I thought someone was being hurt up there. My dad refused to call the sheriff's office and report it. I thought my dad had lost his marbles. The things they said really made me wonder if the sheriffs were scared of the woods. I asked if they couldn't look for vehicle tracks or boot prints up the lane to the gate. They finally said they'd go down there the next day and check. They appreciated that I described the place and helped them feel more at ease. They kept saying the station policy was not to go in the woods for any reason. Some of the neighbors and other kids would share their experiences. We weren't talking about ours with them, but we were listening to what others were having to deal with at their houses. They called them monsters, creatures, monkey men, giants, you name it. We listened to what happened to other neighbors. They would tell us about them because they thought no one was likely to believe kids that heard it and passed it on. The neighbors next door never spoke about their experiences, though. Many times I've read authors saying they had wished they knew. They wished those who knew would share what they know with the world. Well, that's why I started sharing my experiences. Talking about these things has not been easy. I hope it brings awareness to the suffering of experiencers and witnesses and allows them to speak more openly about what has happened to them. Unless we all speak the truth, the world won't know what's been hiding and still being hidden from us. Do we want future generations to carry on living the same lie? Our world is richer and more interesting than most people could ever imagine. These are not creatures. They are quite intelligent, resourceful enough to keep from being caught or killed. They are quite human, if you think about it. Alright folks, I hope you enjoyed these encounters. Now let's check out a couple more video clips. This next video clip, a young lady is sitting on her porch kind of taking a video of the fog and sees this very strange something kind of run quadruped, and then as it hits deeper fog and more towards the side of her yard, or I believe it is her yard, it looks almost like it stands up a little bit. Check it out.
Oh my gosh. Look at all the fog. It's like a horror movie. Oh man. Look at the street light. Fuck is that? Oh my gosh. Look at all the fog. It's like a horror movie. Oh man. Look at the street light. Fuck is that? Oh my gosh. Look at all the fog. It's like a horror movie. Oh man. Look at the street light. Fuck is that?
Alright, I am not sure what it is. It is very creepy. Just going off of how she's responding and acting, it definitely freaked her out. My view on that is, it is creepy, but I wasn't there. And maybe I'd have a different kind of outlook on the situation if I was. Needless to say, it's creepy, and her voice, you can hear terror in her voice. Next video clip I'm going to share with you is a couple guys that go out in their backyard and see something running through the woods. It almost blends into the vegetation a little bit, or kind of camouflages itself in the vegetation. I'm not really sure what it is. It could be a cryptid, or it could be a person in a ghillie suit. Y'all decide.
What the fuck is... I told y'all there was something fucking out here.
Holy shit.
Shoot that motherfucker, dude.
You gotta get in the open.
Hit him. Hit that motherfucker. Dude, I think you fucking missed it. What the fuck is... I told y'all there was something fucking out here.
Holy shit.
Shoot that motherfucker, dude.
You gotta get in the open.
Hit him. Hit that motherfucker. Dude, I think you fucking missed it. What the fuck is... I told y'all there was something fucking out here.
Holy shit.
Shoot that motherfucker, dude.
You gotta get in the open.
Hit him. Hit that motherfucker. Dude, I think you fucking missed it.
Alright folks, that was tonight's final video clip. I'm not sure. Like I said in the beginning, before sharing it, it might be a cryptid or it might be someone in a ghillie suit. I'm leaving that up to you guys to decide for yourselves. I hope you all enjoyed today's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Guys, you and your support is what makes this channel so special and what keeps it growing and going. Thank you. With that, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on your children, your pets, your loved ones, and friends. The best thing that we can do to keep them safe is share the information that we share with each other on a daily basis. God bless you all.